All right, good people. What's going on? All right, January 2023, we're going to start afresh with this boxing YouTube. I can't guarantee how long it's going to last. All I can guarantee is that I promise to try. So I think we tried to do this back in 2019. Was it? Yeah, 2019. And just using the phone on the couch. But this time we've upgraded in professionalism. We're actually using a laptop. So listen, you guys don't want to hear my voice. You want to hear the boxing analysis. So I'm gonna try my best to be a poor man's Addy Aladipo. Shout out to Addy if he ever watches this, right? Because I don't want to be too self-deprecating when I say the poor man's Addy, because everyone's got a different voice, everyone brings different insight. But he's doing an incredible job and a massive inspiration to me. So let's get straight into it. Top 5 fights that I want to see for 2023. And we're going to break down each and every one of them. I got to be honest with you, just as a quick intro before we get into the individual fights. So I'll tell you what they are up front. I'm still learning on the go here. So Wilder Joshua, we're going to talk about JoshuaFury. We're going to talk about Fury Usyk. There's a big heavyweight triangle there going on. Spencer Crawford. Spencer Crawford. I'm new to this, guys. This is raw and real. I mean, there's no editing going on here. So Spence versus Crawford, and then Javante Tank Davis versus King Ryan Garcia. And we're going to break them down in terms of why I want to see them. We're going to talk a little bit about the commercial aspect of the fight and how much they're actually worth. Because that's the big part of it, let's be honest. What the kind of personal storyline is, how we see the fight breaking down from a styles point of view. And also to speak a little bit about how we get there, because some of them, I'm looking forward to them, but I'm looking forward to them for the back end. They're not just going to be immediately available fights. And so, no further ado, let's start off with Wilder Joshua. Now, what I was trying to do with this is I was going to try and change the background. This is some two-bob thing, by the way. I'm just trying to figure this out as I go. I ain't got no experience in doing this, but I'm going to change the background when we start talking about different fights. So, all things being well, boom, that's how we do, baby. This is how we do. God, these other YouTube channels, man, you're not ready for me. Let's get straight into Wilder Fury. This is still a massive fight. This is still a massive fight. And I think that I had this conversation on a boxing WhatsApp group, me and my boys. Do you know what I mean? We've been watching boxing since back in the day. In case anyone's interested, first fight I ever went to live was Kevin Mitchell versus Michael Katsidis at the old West Ham Stadium. And watching it, East London, Kevin Mitchell, local boy, it was a spit sawdust affair. I'm not gonna lie. Old Frank Warren show, and Derek Chisora fought Danny Williams on the undercard, and a young, freshly signed from the Olympics, James DeGale was on the undercard as well. So yeah, I've been going to boxing live for boy, we're talking about 15 years, something like that. But anyway, that's a whole other topic. But I don't even know how we got onto that. This is still a massive fight, is the point, right? And I know Joshua and Wilder, they're both taking some losses. Wilder obviously been turned over, 2 knockouts against Fury. Arguable that he lost the first fight on points as well. Personally, I had Fury winning the first fight by a round. And then Joshua, as we know, he's lost 3 out of his last 5, right? Sandwich in between a very good performance, underrated performance, knocking out Kubrat Pulev, and also turning around the rematch against Andy Ruiz in Saudi Arabia. Now, let's be honest, 2 massive punches, right? You look at Wilder's record, the only man that he hasn't knocked down is nobody, right? Everyone he's ever got into the ring with has touched the canvas. The only person that he hasn't knocked out is Tyson Fury. So he's still massively serviceable, and we saw that against Robert Helenius, right? One left hook, one right hand, the whole fight's over. Joshua, this is where the fight's interesting, because he can be that guy again. He can be that guy again. Now, this is a whole other video in itself, but I feel like if this fight happens, as Eddie Hearn is suggesting it might do towards the end of 2023, right? You could get to a situation where Joshua is that guy again, and this is being seen as a 50-50 fight. Now, granted, at the moment, I think anyone would have to have Wilder as the favorite because we haven't really seen Joshua's hand raised well enough. But thinking about this in a logical sense, right? Last time we saw Josh, I had a 7-5 against Usyk. I had Josh coming into the last 3 rounds ahead by one point. After 9 rounds, I had it 5-4 to Josh. And then I had Usyk running 3 on the spin to make it 7-5. But it was still a better performance. And Usyk's an incredible fighter. We've never seen him lose. We don't know what Usyk's ceiling is. So even though we haven't seen Joshua's hand raised, we have seen him improve against elite level fighters. Now, if you go by the guideline that Eddie Hearn has given, is that we're going to see Joshua 3 times this year. We're going to see him once in April. We're going to see him against a top 15 opponent. We're going to see him again in the summer in a rematch against Dillian Whyte, which is a fight that can suck my... I mean, I'm just getting started on this YouTube. I'm not trying to get disadvantaged by the algorithms already. And then there's going to be a 3rd fight against either Wilder or Fury. So if we imagine that Joshua comes back against a good top 15 opponent, Ade just put out a video. Not that even 5 people are going to see this, but for the 5 people that do, if you haven't checked out Ade, you should, breaking down the people that Josh could face in that. You know, we're talking about people like Charles Martin. Sorry, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. That was for Daniel Dubois. But yeah, there's a few people that Josh could face. Otto Warlin's one of them. I would still be really interested to see a Luis Ortiz fight. There's even talk of maybe a 3rd fight, the rubber match against Andy Ruiz. I think maybe that's a little bit too risky at this point. But if we assume that Joshua comes back and looks good, gets his trainer situation sorted, and then the whole summer hype fest against Dillian Whyte, I don't know, that fight just makes my skin crawl. I was at the first fight, and I was actually training at Finchley ABC with Sean Murphy at the time that fight came around, and that fight was massive. That fight was absolutely huge. 0-2 British title on the line, North London versus South London. But to see it again, I think it's just a money grab. But you'd have to assume that Joshua knocks Dillian Whyte clean out, right? And then we get into the back end of the year. All of a sudden, this is an enormous fight. And whether it's a Vegas fight, whether it's a Nigeria fight, whether it's a Middle East fight, is absolutely enormous, right? 2 big, athletic, ripped heavyweights, as you can see behind me, right? Going for the knockout. It's going to be a 3 to 5 round classic, right? So, I mean, this is obviously the first fight that we've really spoken about. So by default, I think this is the top 1 out of 1. I think definitely in terms of the location, if I had my preference, I feel like this is a Vegas fight. I really do. I feel like back in the day when both guys were champions, both guys were undefeated, when this could have been a unification in the old Shirley Winkle days, this in Vegas would have been absolutely ridiculous, right? And I still think it would be. I still think you get a couple of wins on the spin. Joshua's casual fan base comes back in the UK. They would love an away day to Vegas. Obviously, at the moment, we don't know what the economic situation is. You know, Vegas is always a better time when the economy is booming. And if we have another recession year, then that could, I suppose, maybe make it more likely that it happens in one of the petrodollar countries like Saudi Arabia or Qatar, as we've seen major sports events, or even, you know, we know Joshua has some business connections to Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi. Guys, I'm doing this for the first time. Abu Dhabi is what I meant to say. United Arab Emirates, let's just call it that, right? So I think that would be an absolute monster wherever it would be. But personally, I'd love to see it in Vegas. I'd love to see all the hype. I think definitely the Brits abroad aspect of it, as we've seen with the likes of Ricky Hatton in the past, would be huge. I think that Josh Wilder's a draw in his own right now in Vegas. It would be big. The question then becomes, what does Wilder do in the background? Because we know what Josh was going to be doing to get through to the back end of 2023. And I think that Wilder, it's a little bit harder to match, to be honest, because with Joshua, you have got that grudge match that is going to do big numbers and get the casuals involved against Dylan. And it's a reasonably reliable fight. I don't think anyone in Team Joshua 258 Matchroom is going to be losing sleep over, Dillian White causing an upset. But for Wilder, because he's not as much of a draw and because there isn't really another American to match him up against in a safe way that does big numbers, you might see him just risk it against someone like Andy Ruiz. That fact's been spoken about. Again, you're bringing in two different fan bases. You've got the Mexican-American fan base of Andy Ruiz. You've got the largely African-American fan base within Deontay Wilder, a much smaller fan base, but that confluence of two different fan bases always makes for a big event in the US. 2x world champions, of course. So, risky fight, and there's no guarantee we get to see this one. But I think that if Wilder can come through against a guy like Andy Ruiz or a Charles Martin or even Jermaine Franklin, who had a very close fight, so a lot of people think a robbery against Dillian White. If he can reel off a couple of big wins, then and so can Joshua, then back end of the year in Vegas, or maybe the Middle East, absolute beast of a fight, right? I would have, at the moment, of course, Wilder the favorite, but as I was saying, if Joshua can get a couple of wins and get a consistent trainer situation going, it's a real 50-50. If I had to pick, I'd probably edge with Wilder just because of the power and just because of the vulnerability that we've seen from Josh. So yeah, that's the first fight. That's my analysis. Let's get into the next one now. And the next one is Joshua versus Fury. I'm going to spend a lot less time on this one, to be fair, because I feel like everyone knows the situation with this, right? Massive UK fight, been spoken about a lot, been quite close, as if we're led to believe, of the fight happening even last year. I'm not sure how much I really believed any of that. But I do think that Fury is such a big favorite at the moment, going back to the even what I was saying about the Joshua Wilder fight. It really depends what Josh can pull out the bag. And we're also assuming that Fury can then pull off 2 wins against Usyk. And so, which I'm going to talk about next. At the moment, it's just the probability of it happening is so far away that I think I'm going to just put that one on pause for a second and move straight into Usyk Fury. But obviously, I'm going to be doing tons of these videos, so we can go back to that topic. Right, Usyk versus Fury, or Fury versus Usyk. One of those fights where there isn't a natural storyline, and let's be honest, boxing is a very emotional, tribal, almost like evolutionary survival driven kind of sport where and that's why you're seeing things like Misfits and this Jake Paul stuff where people are more interested in the story than the actual skill being displayed. And there isn't an obvious story around this fight, right? But it is a real purist fight in the sense that the styles are very, very, very compelling. Yeah. So you've got Usyk, who's just got such an incredible spirit, who's got such an incredible gas tank, who's got the movement, who's got the angles, who's got the boxing brain, right? But these are all things that if you didn't know who I was talking about, you might be forgiven for thinking it was a description of Tyson Fury, but he's bigger. Now, obviously, one's physical dimensions are there for all to see, so it doesn't require so much analysis. But what I will focus on the Usyk side is that his footwork, I think, is probably better than even a peak Fury. Even if we go back to Fury versus Klitschko in 2015, uh, that footwork is still probably 10% down on what Usyk is capable of. So whilst they have some similar traits, I don't think that we should lose sight of just the elite level that Usyk is operating at and his ability to command angles and come in and out. I don't see any reality where Usyk could really stop Fury in the same way he hasn't even been able to stop Joshua, who's a lot more vulnerable. But I can see a scenario where Usyk is really able to frustrate Fury and nick a decision. I can see that scenario. I don't think it's the most probable scenario. I think the most probable scenario is that Fury wins a probably unentertaining fight, right? Where they both keep it quite tactical, but Fury is able to keep it long where he needs to, stay out of trouble where he needs to, and then lean on Usyk, wear him down, put him against a rope, put his body weight on him and take something out of those legs. But an intriguing fight, if not an action-packed fight. So in the same way that Wilder and Joshua is going to be a 3 to 5 round shootout, this is going to be the opposite to that. But if you're a purist, entertaining nonetheless. So if we now move on to, so if we're comparing, we spoke about Wilder Joshua, we spoke briefly about Joshua Fury, which I think is a long way away. But if we look at this fight as well, out of that heavyweight mix, I'd have to say Wilder versus Joshua definitely is streets ahead in terms of excitement factor, in terms of fights that I'd really like to see. Even though maybe it doesn't get us any clearer to who the top man is in the division, boxing's an entertainment business. So if we now move down to the welterweight division, try and get I have to move my angle a little bit just so I'm not on the wrong end of a headbutt here. But Spence Crawford, we've been waiting for a long time. Tremendous fight, 2 pound for pound kings. Most people, they don't really have Crawford outside of the top two. You've either got Canelo and Crawford, or you've got Crawford and Canelo. And Spence, I feel like he has a real legitimate argument for that third place, right? I don't think you could really have him any lower than 5th pound for pound, because who have you got above him, right? If you want to talk about Inoue, if you want to talk about Jamel, if you want to talk about Josh Taylor, if you want to talk about, you couldn't even say Devin Haney, who's only really just won the undisputed crown and defended against the same guy. I don't think you could have these guys as anything less than 2 of the top 5 pound for pound. And we've recently seen Crawford look tremendous as he consistently does against David Avanesian. Got paid a lot of money, $10 million by BLK Prime, new entrant to the market, willing to be aggressive. And herein really lies the challenge about us seeing this fight. If we take Terence Crawford at his word from the interviews that were given when the negotiations broke down with PBC, Terence Crawford was willing to take a 20 million guarantee to fight Errol Spence. Okay. And this was supposedly being backed by hedge funds, possibly even BLK Prime that he eventually went with. And there was an 80-20 split on the back end for any net profit that comes from the event. But, there's every possibility that there wouldn't be. So if we're talking 20 million each way, and Crawford can make 10 to fight David Avanesian, and he was still willing to take 20 to beat Spence, or obviously to fight Spence in the belief that he would beat him, but Spence wasn't. We have to start looking at the reality that, or the possibility that this fight never ever happens. Because if you can fight twice a year and make the same money as you would for a career-defining fight that you may lose, let's be real now. Both guys know that there is a possibility where they could lose this fight. Therein you see how difficult it is to make. And for me, something that hasn't been spoken about enough is not just the fear or the knowledge that there's a possibility that one of them could lose the fight. The thing that's really holding the fight back from happening is that both guys understand that even if they win the fight, and let's be honest, these guys are fighters, they believe they're going to win. Of course they do. Even if they win the fight, their commercial value goes down by the fact that they've now had that mountaintop fight. The suspense behind their career starts to evaporate somewhat. And that might seem like a strange thing to say. Like, what do you mean that, okay, if Crawford wins the fight, now he's the biggest thing in world boxing? Not necessarily. Like, if you don't have a massive casual audience behind you, two African-American fighters, Crawford can do a good crowd in Omaha, Nebraska. Spence could do a decent crowd in Dallas, but they're dependent on big opponents to do that. Once they beat the best of their generation, nobody is then interested in them seeing the second or the fourth or the fifth best welterweight, right? If you beat your fellow pound for pound guy, who are you now interested in seeing? It's a bit like when we saw Floyd fight Canelo, right? How much of a drop-off was it to then see him fight Maidana, right? Floyd versus Maidana was a great fight. Maidana was coming off wins of Adrian Broner. But it was a massive drop-off. And then when we saw him fight Pacquiao, who was then interested to see him fight Berto? They stacked that card. You had George Groves versus Badu Jack on there. You had Amir Khan versus, I think, Luis Colazzo on there. And they still couldn't even, I think they sold something like 10,000 tickets at the MGM for Floyd's last fight against Andre Berto with a stacked card. When you beat your mortal enemy, so to speak, right? Even if you win, the big paydays are going to dry up for you at that point because you reached that crescendo point in your career. And both guys are acutely aware of this. So I think it's not just the fear of losing, it's the fear of what is left for you after you win that is really holding this fight back. How do I see it going? For years and years and years. And I've met both guys up close. I met Spence a couple of times, once in the Barclays Center on the Thurman Garcia fight. And then also after he beat Sean Porter, we were in the same hotel, come out the elevator. Like, yo, what's up, Errol? Good fight. And then Terence Crawford, I met him again at the Thurman Garcia fight, but then also Fury Wilder 2 in the MGM. It looked massive, looked absolutely massive in those few years. So in the 3 years, I suppose, between 2017 and 2020, Crawford has got absolute wedge. Which brings me to another point. I think both these guys are roiding. I think boxing, a lot of guys are roiding, right? Probably be quicker to make a list about who's not. But I think both these guys are roiding. Especially when you look at Spence, when he's not fighting, he's out of shape, and you see the double chin. I'm not one to talk right now, but and then you just see how ripped up he gets, and with Crawford, just to see what a slight frame he was in 2017, and how really he's knocking on the door to 154 now. But that's a different topic. I always had Spence winning just because I thought that they were both comparable in their boxing ability. You could say Crawford had some more versatility, but Spence had the size. He was just a much, much bigger guy. Now, I reckon they're about the same size. I really do. Maybe Spence is a little taller, but I think in terms of their build, they're about the same size. And just because of that extra versatility, I think maybe Crawford wins a decision. I actually don't think it's an exciting fight. I think Crawford keeps on the back foot. He does the thing that Spence can't do, which is to fight on the back foot. And he makes it a stinker. And I think that Crawford probably picks up a decision, if I'm honest. Not a high degree of conviction in that, but good fight. But I think when it gets into the ring, you've got two elite guys that both know what they're doing going forward and going back. Spence probably with a higher output and the work rate, getting behind that jab, being methodical, trying to break down Crawford to the body. But Crawford, I feel like that improvisational skill and that cerebral knowledge of being unpredictable or then being predictable, coming in and out, and just giving Spence looks that he wouldn't be able to anticipate and necessarily prepare for in camp, maybe gives Crawford the edge. Because if you think about the whole camp, Crawford's going to be able to get guys that get behind that jab and work you body head, and try and methodically break people down with his volume punching. But I don't know who Spence can get to really mimic Crawford and make sure that he can stay switched on when Crawford he switches southpaw. You know, he has so many hybrid shots that he throws where you don't know whether it's a hook or an uppercut. You don't know even if it's a jab or a southpaw right hand, as Kell Brook found out. I feel like that element of surprise just gives Crawford the edge, to be honest. So I've changed my mind on that over the years. But yeah, last but not least, let's get into, for me, probably the most exciting fight of the year, the one I'm looking forward to more than any other. And without me saying it, here it is for you guys. Tank versus Ryan. For me, this is the boss fight. This is the one that I'm really looking forward to, right? See the excitement coming out in me, right? This fight is the kind of fight that we haven't had in years. And I kind of worry that in 2023, we're in this transition period in boxing where the big pound for pound stars, the big money makers are kind of going out of the sport. And even those, I feel like those A grade guys, but not the elite grade guys, are kind of going out the sport as well. And we've had Canelo, but honestly, there wasn't a fight in 2023 that makes my top five that I'm really excited about seeing, you know. Can he beat Bivol at 168? Fantastic, all right. You know, David Benavidez, but there isn't that big fight that brings together two different diverse audiences that are both undefeated, both knockout punchers, both young as well. Both, you know, these guys, they're mid-20s. Even when you look at like Joshua Wilder, Spence Crawford, all these other fights we're talking about, you're talking about guys in their 30s that, you know, one of them's taken a loss. Okay, Spence Crawford, they're both undefeated, but, you know, are they at their peak? Are they knocking guys clean out, right? Okay, Crawford, maybe he's getting knockouts, but if some of those opponents that he's fought in recent years are questionable, guys. I mean, his record at 147 questionable. I mean, maybe I should have spoken about this in the last segment, but the point I'm trying to make is, yeah, Tank and Ryan, both of them, you would have to say they haven't hit their peak yet. They haven't hit their peak. They're still on the upward trajectory. They're knocking guys out. They're young, you know, pause. They're good looking. Full of fucking spunk, pause. Do you know what I mean? Like, both got celebrities. Is what, like, do you remember those fights you used to see in boxing? You don't see it as much anymore, where it was like spot the celebrity at ringside. You're like, oh, there's Jennifer Lopez, oh, it's Fat Joe, oh, it's P. Diddy, oh, it's Warren Buffett, you know, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I feel like this is the only fight that can bring that razzmatazz. You know, Ryan Garcia, massive following on Instagram. I know that doesn't necessarily translate to box office in boxing pay-per-view. Tank, you know, every time he fights, you see guys like the LeBron, Odell Beckham Jr. from NBA and NFL at his fights. This is going to really capture the imagination. And honestly, it's one of those fights where even the loser comes out a bigger star than when they went in, right? My concern about the fight, if I had to be picky, has Ryan really proved himself, right? Fortuna, serviceable fighter. Luke Campbell, very good fighter, but didn't fight again after that, if I'm not mistaken. So probably maybe knew that he was on his way out. And I would have, in an ideal world, I would have preferred to see King Rai, or should I say Prince Rai, be crowned a world champion. So you've got even if they're not both reigning, at least you've got a clash of two undefeated world champions, right? Two world level guys. And Tank, he's really proven himself. You know, we're talking, I think, 26-0, 24 knockouts. There's been a lot of careful matchmaking in there. I'm not going to lie, right? A lot of smaller guys. When he fought guys his own size, they've been non-punchers. But you can't argue with 26-0, 24 knockouts, multi-weight world champion. Probably hasn't always fought the best guys in his division either. But two box office guys bringing diverse audiences, young, athletic. Neither of them have hit their peak. These guys could fight, you know, 2 or 3 times, but not necessarily back to back. They could fight now. They could fight when they're both at, you know, late 20s, and then they could fight in their 30s as well. And both guys come out of this fight bigger. So just for that whole factor of what I said about the razzmatazz and both upward trajectory, big punches as well. For me, this one is the most anticipated fight. And the one, if I could choose, if I could be live at any one of these, could you imagine this one at Staples Center? I mean, just for the Latin things. I mean, just for the Latin things alone. Not to mention the light skin things. Do you know what I mean? It would be an absolute madness. So for me, I would say this one at Vegas, Staples Center, Jerry World in Dallas, it would be an absolute monster of a fight. So, yeah, we'll go for that. In terms of who wins it, you'd have to give the edge to Tank. He's one thing that you've seen with Tank, even when he's not winning fights, he's experienced now. He knows what to do to hide in the long grass and catch people on the counter and get them out of there. You saw that against Rolly. Let's be honest, Tank was getting fists up. You know what I mean? Tank was getting fists up against Broly. He was putting it on him with that pressure, the bigger man, with the aggression. But Tank knows what to do to just catch people coming in, and that comes from experience and being very well looked after. Ryan, on the other end, as I was saying, he hasn't really been at that top level. And I am kind of concerned about his mindset. The fact he didn't want to take the warm-up fight in anticipation. We saw Tank fight this weekend. We've seen Tank, I think, fight 4 times in the last 18 months. And Ryan's only fought, I think, twice since Luke Campbell, which was 2 years ago. So has he really been active? Does he want to be active? Is he looking at this as a big payday? You know, we know Ryan lives that life. I mean, a lot of boxers these days in the States, they live that life with the bling and the cars and the girls, and I don't know how many baby mamas he's got, but that shit ain't cheap, especially in America. You know, not that I'm speaking from experience or nothing, but the question is Ryan just looking for a big payday and you know, then he's going to go into something else? But if they both bring their A game, I think it's a great fight. I think maybe Tank gets him out of there late. And I think Ryan comes out a bigger star at the end of it, as long as he puts in a good performance. I can see both guys getting dropped and maybe Tank getting off the canvas and getting Ryan out of there. So guys, I'm not going to hold you any longer. That's my first attempt. If you like it, we're going to do some more. If you don't like it, we're going to do some more. I've been the Butcher. You've been a fantastic audience. Peace.